and we're here to talk about what hyperdocs are. So this is going to be 2 or 3 videos talking about what hyperdocs are. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about just basically what a hyperdoc is, and the second 2 or 3 videos will be just walking you through different hyperdocs. Okay, so the issue here is that when you have um, we've been talking about good course design. This module we were talking about techniques for online instruction, the 4 C's and all that. Well, how does it all go together? And I just wanted to give you one way. There's multiple ways you can do this, but one way you could put things together to really let students learn. The reason why I'm saying this is because once you go into the digital space and you're talking about asynchronous learning, this is way more student-centered learning. And it's something that's, it takes some practice and it takes some thinking about. And this is one little way to maybe open up the door and a method that you could use to do some online learning and some student-centered approaches. So the HyperDocs was born out of a couple different things, but for me, this is where I was in my journey. Is you've got the 4 C's. This is over here. You've got the SAMR model. We've got the NGSS. We've got Common Core. We've got these other things, which is the depth of knowledge, blended learning methodology, all these different things. And how do you do all this? And sometimes you just get like this. Like I don't know how to put a lesson together anymore, because what is good learning? What is all this stuff? So the idea is that a hyperdoc takes all that information, all those requirements, and you take that all into account. You put it into this hyperdoc system, which is good pedagogy, and that starts to take care of all the underlying standards and things that you need. And you put it together with the technology tools and you mix it together, and boom, you get a hyperdoc. So that is what a hyperdoc is. A hyperdoc is taking all that underlying stuff that you've already heard about and putting it in a way to think about and build so that you can get students to learn. Okay? It was the brainchild of this Kelly Hilton, Lisa Highfill, and Sarah Landis. They wrote a book called the HyperDoc Handbook, I believe. There's a website out there. The website has this piece in it, which is, I think, currently under construction, which is Teachers Give Teachers. So the whole point of that is if you make a HyperDoc, you put it in the database. Somebody else finds it. They can use it if they want to, and then they'll give you credit if they use yours and then just slightly adjust it. So there's no pay involved or anything like that. They want it to be an open sharing community. Now, what's the difference between hyperdocs and hyperlinks? Well, because a lot of people think that a hyperdoc is a hyperlink document where you have them go to a website, you have them go to this website, you have them, and then they just read. And in actual fact, it's a different kind of pedagogy, which is really set in some of the stuff from that first slide of the 4 C's and the blended learning methodology, depth of knowledge, Bloom's taxonomy, all those different things. It's all set in there. It's all mixed in here. And so if you do a hyperdoc, you're going to be collaborating, you're going to be creating, you're going to be reflecting, and there's going to be an extension. So when you finish, you're done. Okay. Like if you have early finishers, those early finishers will have something to do. That's the extension part. So they're going to make something, then they'll reflect about what they've learned. So how do you do this? And again, this is just a quick overview. We'll go through a hyperdoc so you can kind of see it and go from there. So how do you do all this? You first, if you notice from module 2, you have to start with the objectives and how long you're going to take. Those two things are really important. Okay, once you know the objectives, then you want to know is what thing or process are students going to have to do to create to show that they understand and have the knowledge that you want them to have. So how are you going to assess them? So you first know the objectives. The second is you build the assessment. Then after that, you have to decide the model of learning you want to undergo. Is it a workshop model? Is it really the hyperdoc mode? Is it the 5 E's, which we'll show in a second? It's a These are all different templates that can be used with hyperdocs. After that, it's what tools are you going to give them? Okay, what are you going to give them so that they can build that knowledge, so that they can complete that assessment and show you that they are understanding, and learning. And then how are you going to get it to the students, and how are you going to give them feedback? Because right, students need to know if they're learning the right things or not. So can is there a way to build in certain feedback so that they know, okay, I've gone through step 2, now I know that I know this part, now I move on to step 3. How are you going to build that all together so it becomes sequential and orderly? It's something else we've mentioned in module 2 and module 1. Okay, then we're going to make it for the student. So notice the making is the last thing. We have to have all these 1 through 5 in place, then we make it. So here are some of the things. Here's the HyperDoc template, which is engage, explore, explain. Here is another template. Here's the 5 E's up here, and these are all linked in this document. I'll put it in the resource page so you can look at it if you want. Here's the workshop method. So these are all different methods or templates. These are all using Google Docs. However, here's the neat thing. You can use and build them from scratch from any of these. If you're comfortable in Google Docs, then use Google Docs. If you want it to be able to do something that Google Docs doesn't do, and you're okay with Google Slides, then use Google Slides. If you want something that's kind of interesting and can be done differently, you can use Google Forms if you're experienced with Google Forms. But use something that is you're comfortable with, and that when you're comfortable with it, you will be able to work with it better, and you'll have less cognitive energy wasted on the thing you're using and more wasted on building that good educational experience for the student. So use something you're comfortable with first and then build from there. It's always building, starting small, build bigger. Or the cool part about HyperDocs is you can modify them. So that Teacher Give Teacher has a wealth of them. There's a Facebook group where you can go on and say, does anybody have a HyperDoc about this? And the likelihood is that you'll find one out there. You might have to modify it, and then you just give that person credit. But that's what a HyperDoc is. A HyperDoc is really a system of thinking to get you to a product or a lesson where students can learn in a self-centered, almost, if you wanted to, self-paced system. All right, that's where we're going to stop. See you.